All right, hello and welcome to tonight's webinar, Secondaries That Secure Interviews with Linda Abraham from Accepted.com. My name is Samantha Mellinger and I am the Director of Partnerships and Marketing for the Student Doctor Network. Our mission is simple. We help students from underserved communities increase their chances of admission to health professional school. And we do this by offering donor-supported guidance, advising, and assistance to students regardless of background or financial means. And we invite you to check out some of our many resources that we have available at studentdoctor.net. A few housekeeping items before we get started tonight. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted both on our YouTube channel as well as Accepted's afterwards. So if you have to leave at any point, that's totally fine. Or if you know someone who maybe wasn't able to attend tonight, check back on both of our YouTube channels later and you'll be able to access it there. Also, to submit a question, please enter it into the Q&A box at any point in the presentation, and then we will work through all of those questions during the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. For over 25 years, Accepted has helped applicants gain acceptance to their dream healthcare programs. Their team of admissions consultants features former admissions directors, admissions committee members, pre-health advisors, post-bac program directors, as well as physicians. And their experts have guided applicants to acceptance to allopathic and osteopathic medical schools, residencies and fellowships, dental school, veterinarian school, and physician assistant programs at various top schools. During the presentation, founder of Accepted and admissions expert Linda Abraham will share with you helpful tools you need to ace this crucial part of the medical school application process. And now I am happy to turn it over to Linda to get started this evening.
Thank you so much, Samantha. I really appreciate it. I want to also express my thanks not only to Samantha, but to Student Doctor Network for inviting me to present today. As Samantha said, I'm Linda Abraham, President and founder of Accepted. And I want to also thank you for joining me today. I also want to introduce you to a free resource, a gift from Accepted to SDN members that will complement the information provided in this webinar. The free resource is a free download, The Ultimate Guide to Secondary Essays. Now, before diving into the heart of the webinar, I'd like to learn a little bit about you. So I'm going to post a poll and just choose the option that best describes you. The option is R, I'm a first-time applicant or re-applicant. I'm a first-time applicant or re-applicant. Okay, with 81% having voted, anybody else want to? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Well, 82% are first-time applicants, okay, and 18% are re-applicants. All right, that's pretty impressive percentages there, especially for the first-time applicants. And I think we had well over 80% participating. Let's go to the next poll. Which best describes you? I haven't yet submitted my MCAS application, but I plan to do so for this cycle. I already submitted my MCAS application, and I'm not applying this cycle. Again, the options are, I have not yet submitted my MCAS app, but plan to do so for this cycle. I submitted already, and I'm not applying this cycle. And we are at 91% having voted. We have a great group here today. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So 29% have not yet applied. 58%, congratulations, have already submitted their MCAS. That's fantastic. And 13% are planning to apply next cycle and are really, really planning ahead. Okay, let's get started. That's good to know. All right. I want to congratulate you. You've started down the path to medical school and the achievement of your career dreams. Still, even for those of you who've already submitted your primary, you have quite a journey in front of you. But the next leg, or at least the leg that I'm going to discuss today, after submitting the primary, is secondary applications. And that's the topic of today's webinar. So the plan for the webinar is to discuss conceptually what secondary essays are, the similarities and differences with the primary application, and the common type of secondary essays and how to respond to the most common types, dealing with the tight word and character limits that so often characterizes secondary essays. And for those of you who haven't submitted your primary, it'll probably help you with the primary too. The importance of timing and your secondaries and how to handle that. And then I'm going to close with some final tips on how to proof your secondaries, which will also help those of you who have not yet submitted your primary. Okay, so what are secondary applications? Let's just start with that. For those of you new to the process, secondary application invitations are sent out after medical schools have received your MCAS or your primary application, and they are sent by, and verified it, by the way, and they are sent by individual schools, not by an application service, not by MCAS, ACOMAS, or TMDSAS. Secondary applications typically contain anywhere from one long essay to 8 essays. Yes, I did say 8. Some are screened either manually by human being or programmatically, looking for a certain minimum GPA or a certain minimum MCAT score. Most at this point in time are sent automatically by the schools once they receive word that your primary application is verified. Now, the purpose of the secondaries, like the primary, the purpose of the secondary is to help the admissions committee get to know you. Most secondaries that ask for more than just a check, and they all ask for a check, again, they're trying to learn about you. They're trying to meet you. They're trying to get to know you. And your job is to help them get to know you. In this regard, the secondaries have a very similar purpose to the personal statement on whether it's on the MCAS or the other primary application essays, and primary applications rather, and also the experience sections. They're trying to get to know you. But I'd like for you to answer me in the chat window, please. How do secondaries differ from the primary application in terms of the writing required? If you could share your answers with me in the chat window. Good, Eloise. They're more specific to the school of interest, more specific story. Excellent. More focused on school specific. Don't want you to regurgitate your primary. 100% right. Specific questions about topics. Very good. Secondary should be aligned with mission values, not why you want to be a doctor. Very good. You guys are great. Address more specific questions such as adversity, leadership, unique experiences. Wonderful. Okay, let's move on. But you're all right on. There are 4 key ways in which the secondary differs sharply from the primary application personal statement, and I think you each mentioned at least one of them. The purpose of the secondary is for you to show fit with a specific school, the one sending you the application, not the application you just worked on last night, tonight's application. The primary application's goal is to show your fitness and motivation for becoming a physician, not attending a specific school. The secondary application's goal is to show that you belong at a specific school. How do you do that? There are basically 3 steps. Show that you appreciate the school's approach to medical education, that it fits you. Show that your goals as a medical student and physician align with its strengths, primary care versus research, urban versus rural medicine, most applicants going into specialties or most going into primary care. Those are all relevant questions. And again, as some of you said in my question a minute ago, show fit with the school's mission. That's one element to the secondary that's specific to the secondary and not part of the primary. The other part of it is that you must answer the question posed. It's not a wide open kind of thing like the personal comments section in the primary, or even the most meaningful experience essays, which are not tied to a specific program or school, and the questions are still very, very general. The third key difference is that you want your secondary application to complement and build on the stories and experiences discussed in the primary application. So one of you said, don't repeat what's in your primary. You're 100% right. And now how do you do that? You can discuss experiences not discussed in your primary. You can discuss experiences perhaps that took place since you submitted your primary. If you're discussing experiences that were mentioned in the primary, and many of you will, you need to go into greater depth or approach it from a different perspective. So for example, if you discussed your research experience in your primary application, and you have a question on the secondary that asks about teamwork, maybe your research experience was very relevant in terms of teamwork, or maybe a sporting activity or something like that. So you might end up discussing the activity, but you're not going to go into the technical details of your research. In this case, you're going to talk about working in a team. Paraphrasing or merely repeating material found in the primary is just a wasteful mistake. It's not going to add to the reader's understanding of you. It's not going to be persuasive to them because they already just read it. So that's another element. And the fourth key difference is that there's a lot of time pressure to turn the secondaries around, right? You've had months that you knew you were going to apply and you could prepare for your personal statement. Maybe you wait to the last minute. That's a different question. But there's no waiting to the last minute with secondaries, because the minute comes within 2 weeks of receipt of the secondary. So there's a lot of time pressure with the secondaries. The similarities and differences mean that you have 6 secondary commandments, okay? They are, you want the secondaries to help them get to know you, to add to their insight into you as a human being, a future physician, and a member of their community. You want to show that you appreciate the school's approach to medical education, whether it's problem-based learning or systems-based learning or small groups, whatever it is. Why does that appeal to you? If that question is asked, by the way. And you want to demonstrate that your goals align with the school's strengths and values. So if a school proclaims that it is a social justice school or a school devoted to serving the underserved, have you worked in your community soup kitchen? Have you worked with the homeless? Where can you demonstrate that you identify with those values? You obviously have to answer the specific question posed. Again, not the question you answered last night, but the question posed. Can you adapt essays from earlier schools? You can, but adapting is not the same as copying and pasting. And you have to make absolutely sure that you change the school name and you change the essay to be appropriate for this school, this question, and in the context of the larger application, right? Because you're going to have other questions you could be responding, or maybe you have other questions to respond to. So you have to think strategically about what experiences are best going to support your answer to a specific question. And as I said before, you want to make sure that your secondaries complement and build on the primary. That means, to the extent possible, telling different stories, bringing in different experiences, or at least approaching those experiences from a different angle and with a different perspective. And again, you want to return essays promptly. So those are your tasks, your goals, your mission as you approach secondary application essays. There are 3 really, really common types of questions in secondary applications. And we're going to go through all 3 of them. There are questions about you. There are questions about the school. And there's questions about you and the school. These are really, really common. Okay. Let's deal with how you can approach a typical question about you. Question about you can be one long autobiographical essay or several shorter questions about you. For example, Baylor asks, or asked last year, I should say, any special experiences, unusual factors, or other information you feel would be helpful in evaluating you, including but not limited to education, employment, extracurricular activities, prevailing over adversity. You may expand upon, but not repeat, MCAT application information. So this is just all about you. They're not asking about how you're going to contribute to Baylor, how you're going to fit into their community, or anything like that. They're trying to get to know you better. Other possible sample short essay questions might ask about challenges overcome, which Baylor kind of indicates, prevailing over adversity. Your most rewarding experience, to talk about leadership or teamwork experiences, any special interests you might have in a particular area of medicine, where do you see yourself in 10 years, et cetera. These are all questions about you. And you can respond to them with a story that illustrates a point. Again, length is relevant. And then talk about what that story means. Why is it significant? Why are you choosing to talk about it? What does it say about you and your values? What did you learn from the experience? There's another type of question that I think you're likely to see this cycle in particular, and maybe for the next few cycles, and that are COVID. Those are COVID-related questions. The question could be something like, how did COVID affect you? Now, I certainly hope it's not true, but it could be that some of you were ill. Some of you could have had family members that were seriously ill or even, God forbid, passed away. Perhaps you couldn't shadow or volunteer the way you wanted. But I wouldn't limit the answer to those questions, unless it's really, really short, to maybe you lost a job, another impact of COVID. I wouldn't limit your response to just what happened to you. I would also discuss and try and bring out how you responded. What did you do? Did you take care of a sick family member? Did you start a volunteer program to help shut-ins in your neighborhood? Did you volunteer perhaps at a vaccination clinic? Did you get involved in contact tracing? Did you, I don't know, there's so many different ways to volunteer. Did you try and get vaccinations to the homeless? So don't limit your response to COVID questions to what happened to you. Also discuss how you responded. In responding to these questions about you, you want to include information, as I said before, and I'll say it again, not provided in the primary or other parts of the secondary. You want it to be additive. If the perfect experience was already covered in the MCAS, then again, approach it from a different angle or provide greater depth. Now, in terms of where will you draw these experiences from, you might want to create a timeline that can cover formative experiences. You can go back to adolescence, maybe even childhood and adulthood, but I would try and keep most of your experiences, both in the MCAS and the secondaries, on college and post-college. What kind of information could you include about yourself? What would you say to that in the chat window, please? What kind of information would you want to include in a secondary? Cultural competency, good. My non-traditional background, good. Being a graduate student, more perspective on healthcare, that could be very good. Overcoming homelessness, very good. What about clinical exposure? Information on developing skills related to medicine, very good, Vivek. Anybody want to talk about clinical exposure, employment, and how whatever you've done would make you a better physician? Good. Specific interactions and volunteering with the patients, excellent, excellent, Nilesh. All right, good. All these, can we speak about our other careers if we're non-traditional? Yes. Yes. Again, depends on the question and all those other things that I'm talking about. But yes, working as an emergency room scribe for 2 years, sure. That might be, again, you got to look at the question. But when you're talking about experience and telling a story, say what happened, say maybe results, the impact you had. You might want to, if the question is asking about feeling, you might discuss how something felt, but also what you learned, which would be the significance of the event in the context both of medical school admissions and the question being posed. You may want to use a timeline you've created. You might want to create rather a timeline of your life that includes all significant events and or an updated copy of your resume or CV. Again, I'd stay away from high school and earlier unless it was something truly significant, some major illness, which I hope that's not true. But it does happen. So never say never, but keep it focused much more on college, post-college. Check off, when you make your timeline, check off the items you've already covered in your primary application and looking at the list from the remaining items that you have not covered, which will help you best respond to the questions, which are related to clinical, to research, to your professional life, or leadership and community service, which best answer the questions. Are there any items that relate to how you have overcome adversity? Because that will demonstrate resilience. That's a quality that is really important for physicians to have. Strategically selecting the activities or events that will reveal more about you as a person, and then create an outline of again, based on the questions you have on a specific secondary and the events in your life that you have not yet discussed, you can then bring them into the secondary and kind of approach the secondary strategically. Now, so that's questions about you. Remember, the second type of question are essay questions about school. So for example, I have Cornell's on the screen now, right now. Please write a brief statement giving your reasons for applying to Weill Cornell Medical College. It's a variation of the most common types of questions about a school is, why do you want to attend this school? And you should be able to answer it, if not on the secondary, then certainly for an interview. And they want to know how much you know about their school and what is important to you in a program. So it's absolutely vital that you do your research before responding to these kinds of questions. Presumably, you've done research even before checking the boxes in the primary application as to where they should send the primary, and you took notes when you did that research. But you might want to refresh those notes or look again. What are some ways you can find out about the school? In the chat window, please. Social media, okay, that's one way for sure. On their website, absolutely, that's the place to start. Talking to current medical students, absolutely. Going to open houses, MSAR, very good. Speaking to alumni. Website sites that gather info to build profiles, virtual fairs. Yeah, okay, you folks got it. You're a great audience. So also the mission statement. Values, most schools will have a mission statement and value statements. The website, pre-med fairs, visiting schools when that's allowed, and that will hopefully start being allowed soon. Virtual events. Most schools are holding virtual events, and you should attend them. Networking, many of you mentioned talking to current students and alumni. In social media, that's right. Don't forget the YouTube channel. It's a great way to learn more about a school. Your strategy should be here to demonstrate how well you know their school and how much research you've done by establishing a clear understanding of what they offer that will benefit you, help you reach your career and educational goals, and also allow you to contribute. Since space is limited, keep this essay focused and select only the most relevant and important reasons why you want to attend a specific medical school. Now, the last type of very common secondary question is questions about you and them. An example would be Columbia's. Columbia Vagelos College of Physicians and Surgeons values diversity in all its forms. How will your background and experience contribute to this important focus of our institution and inform your future role as a physician? It's 300 words, by the way. Now, the challenge here is that this type of question requires you to balance information about you and about the school and how they all come together. Again, look at your timeline. Focus on what hasn't been checked off, and what distinctive elements in your background, identity, experience, or perspective can you contribute at, in this case, Columbia or at the school, and how will that inform your future role as a physician? How will you choose to express it, both at Columbia, Vagelos, and beyond? You may want to adjust some of the experiences in other essays. In other words, if your leadership experience also shows diversity, a commitment to diversity and in all its forms, you may decide to choose a different leadership experience for the leadership experience, and then choose the leadership experience that also relates to diversity for this particular essay question. So again, when you're approaching the secondaries, before you start writing, take a step back and think, how can I best answer these questions, where each essay is going to add value to my application, make them want to admit me more, and add to their insight into me. Okay, now, so those are the three most common types of questions: questions about you, questions about the school, and questions about you and the school. Timing, I mentioned that a minute ago. If the primary and secondary do their jobs, you're going to get an interview invitation. Now, interview invitations are issued on a rolling basis. In other words, applications are generally evaluated as they come in, as secondaries come in, I might add. Interview invitations go out as applications are evaluated. So it's critical that you turn around your secondary applications promptly, because that's when there are the most interview invitations available early in the process. So I was really pleased to see that over half of you have already submitted your primary. We recommend that you return secondaries within 2 weeks of receipt and without compromising the quality of the essays. So that's a pretty tall task. It means, just wipe your calendar clean when you anticipate those secondaries arriving. It also means that it can be really advisable to pre-write the most common types of secondaries or secondaries for the schools that you are most interested in. You can find, as I'm sure you realize, secondary essay questions from last year on SDN. We have some on Accepted with tips on how to respond to them. Again, if you are, but right now, many of you, 58% of you said you've done your primary. So you're expecting secondaries to start coming in early July. I would, or the end of June. I would strongly encourage you to pre-write the secondaries that are either most likely to come up or the schools that you're most interested in. Yes, they do sometimes change the questions. I know that happens, but there are some that you're almost guaranteed to get, and you'll be better off for having written them. And if they're not exactly that on that application, you'll probably see it on another one. Okay. Now, there are two elements to everybody's application. There's your qualifications, right? Your stats, your experience. There's also how you present your experience in particular. And because of the word limits throughout the application process, you have to be concise and to the point, no matter what. And in reality, in life, you want to be concise and to the point because people don't want to read more than they have to read. So the secondary application, as well as the primary for that matter, you are also demonstrating your ability to write and communicate clearly and concisely. Whether your essay is longer or shorter, what is the point you are trying to communicate? And make sure that point is clear and exclude anything that isn't necessary to make that point. Keep in mind that most secondaries are short. 300 to 500 words is a nice sized essay, and it's basically the 500 words is pretty much a 5-paragraph essay like you learned in elementary school. You don't have a lot of room. So keep them focused. That's the first technique. I think it's very important to clear writing. Also, write concretely. Use sensory language whenever possible. You can write the flame burned or the flame danced. And danced, frankly, is the same number of words, but it's a lot more descriptive if you ever watch a candle burning. Quantify your impact whenever possible, especially when you're talking about contribution and results, or even the responsibility you've handled. So if you led a team, was it a 2-member team or was it a 10-member team or a 20-member team? Have you tutored kids or have you tutored 10 kids? Have you tutored 10 kids at a school that sends about 10% of its graduates to college, and yet all 10 of your students decided to go to college? You're showing results. You're quantifying your impact. Do so whenever possible. And use metaphors to succinctly make concepts more real and relate them to the familiar, while also writing in a more engaging manner. So, for example, you could write, "I'll never forget when whatever happened. Or you could say, "This incident is tattooed in my memory." Now, don't all write that on your essays because obviously they'll get a little suspicious about all these people with tattooed memories. But you get the idea. It's indelible, right? It's a part of you. All right. So those are just some very general tips for more engaging, clear, succinct writing. But you really need to put your writing on a diet. Okay. And I'm going to give you some more techniques for putting your writing on a diet, which is going to be really, really important. Yes, it would have been nice in the primary, but it's really important in the secondaries. Okay, so here's an example. First of all, can you raise your hand if you know the difference between the active voice and the passive voice? Okay, I'm going to change my question, I think. How many of you don't know the difference between the active voice and the passive voice in writing? All right. It's actually not that different. Okay. I'm going to very briefly explain it. When the active voice the subject of a sentence is doing something. In the passive voice, the subject of the sentence is having something done to him, her, or it. All right. And the active voice is always more succinct and frankly, usually more interesting. The passive voice is wordier and says and takes more space to say less, and usually is a little bit less pleasant to read. So here you have a sentence in the active voice. The patient was cured. No, this is the passive voice. In the chat window, please. How would you put that in the active? Exactly. The doctor cured the patient. All right. Another way to, again, put your writing on a diet is to try and use verb forms of words instead of noun or adverbial forms. So you could say, I came to the conclusion, or you could say, I concluded. Again, here's another example. She went hurriedly, or she hurried. Again, these are small things that when you go through your essay, don't worry about this when you're writing a first draft. Right, the doctor cured the patient. Okay. When you're writing a first draft, don't worry about this. But when you're revising, this is the stuff you want to watch for, and this will really, really slim down your writing. Put your writing on a diet by eliminating unnecessary phrases and words. Here's another one. I had the opportunity to serve as an EMT. How would you shorten it? Exactly. Exactly. I served as an EMT. Okay. Here are now, I wouldn't even know, I served as an EMT. That's it. Or I worked as an EMT. That would work too. But I got to serve as an EMT is still more wordy than you need. Now, here are some tips for proofing your secondaries, okay? Because you don't want them to be sloppy. First level of proofing is, do you address the question and reveal fit with this specific school? Okay. And then this is particularly important, again, if you're adapting secondaries from another school's application. Don't fall into, first of all, definitely change the name of the school. And secondly, but that's just kind of superficial. If you don't, it's superficially bad. It's really bad. If the answer doesn't, if your essay doesn't really answer the question posed or doesn't show fit with the school because you're basically borrowing from another essay, it doesn't work. You can adapt to this application. And then check for grammar, spelling, and style. Are your essays well written? You want your applications to reflect your attention to detail and your communications ability, not the lack thereof. I once spoke with Jennifer Welch. She is the admissions dean at SUNY Upstate. And she said, and I'm quoting now, you are not going to be able to make these mistakes, in other words, grammar and sloppy mistakes, on patient charts. So why are you doing it in application? So really just thinking about those things when you're putting it together is really imperative. Now, my favorite recommendations for proofing essays of any kind is to print them out. First of all, to separate, put some distance and time between your last revision, the last time you tried to work on it, and when you're proofing it. And then print it out. I'd print it out double or triple spaced and read it out loud. Read it out loud, have a pen. So when you see something, you can mark on it, or pencil, I don't care about that. If possible, even change locations when you proof. So that if you normally are writing at a desk, go to the kitchen table or a couch or whatever. And you will find that your ear will catch errors that your eyes would miss on the screen. So that is my favorite tip for proofing. Give it a little bit of time between your last revision and then print it out and read it out loud. Don't try and proof from the screen. And finally, and as we said this again, try and return your applications within 2 weeks of receipt and without compromising quality. So we're going to go to the Q&A in just a few minutes. What are successful secondaries? They are well-written, concise, persuasive, promptly returned applications that answer the questions, reveal fit with a specific school, and add to the school's understanding of you. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to start the Q&A in a minute, but I have a question for you. What was the most valuable piece of information, advice, or insight that you got from today's presentation? And if you could share that in the question window, please, I'd appreciate it. I'm sorry, in the chat window. I'm getting myself confused. I'm sorry. Focus on revealing fit, passive versus active, to make a timeline. Great. Recommended timeline. Do research on the schools you're interested in. Wonderful. The switch from passive to active. Okay, good. Tips on proofing. Don't repeat pieces from your primary. Great. Okay, thank you. This is very helpful. Now, I've spoken with hundreds, if not thousands, probably thousands, of medical school applicants like you, striving to get into medical school and challenged by the sheer work required by the process and concerned that you may not make the cut. We at Accepted know how difficult this process is, and we're here to help you. Your goal is to apply confidently and successfully to the best programs for you. You're at a crossroads now. You can take the do-it-yourself approach, or you can invest in your professional future. Our clients benefit from the know-how supplied by experts, applying their expertise to their applications on an individual basis. No matter how hard I try in a webinar or masterclass or podcast or the forums, the advice I provide has to be general. When you work with a consultant one-on-one, the advice is geared to you and is specific to you. Given the complexity of the application process, you can benefit from a guide who knows the process inside and out and who can support you through this grueling journey. You need Accepted to be your guide. When you gauge Accepted, you can access professional expert advice, experience, objectivity. You can save time. You can apply with confidence. You can apply successfully. We have the admissions experts, the guides, who can mentor you through the process so that you achieve your goal of applying confidently and successfully. Former admissions directors, residency committee members, post-bac program directors, and experienced consultants who have been on the other side evaluating applicants and who can mentor you through the application process. Last year, we surveyed our MD and DO clients, and respondents enjoyed a 95% acceptance rates. Now, here's what you should do after the webinar, after the Q&A. Visit accepted.com/medical/services. Choose a service that's right for you. Get the guidance you need to apply the high-level advice I've given here to your specific situation, and go from confusion to clarity and from doubts to confidence. But enough from me. Let's see what a couple of Accepted's clients have said. And I'm going to pick and choose from here, okay? In addition to helping me select schools, Dr. Barry Rothman, ensured that my application, both primary and secondary, correctly highlighted my strengths. And due to his advice, I was able to receive several interview invites. Or the next one, I will be attending the University of Washington School of Medicine. I received an email from the Dean of Admissions stating that I am awarded a hefty scholarship. I'm feeling blessed and excited right now. Or the last one from a third client. I don't think I would be the same place today without your help. So out of 20 secondaries, I received 18 interviews. I went to 11. I was accepted to 5 and waitlisted at 4. We'd love to help you as we help these clients, the ones who wrote the comments you just saw, and thousands of other clients over the last 27 years. So once again, I encourage you to visit accepted.com/medical/services, choose a service that's right for you, get the guidance you need, and apply confidently and effectively. And I also just want to remind you that we do have a free download for you folks, the Ultimate Guide to Secondary Essays, and you can get that at accepted.com/secondary guide. And now for your questions, and I see that there are a whole bunch of them. Again, you've been a fantastic audience. And for the Q&A, I'm going to actually come on camera if you want. Okay. Let's see. Do you hear me? Okay. No. Having a little problem here. No, it's okay. Okay, how would you advise that I approach secondary application questions about diversity? That's really hard to answer without knowing anything about you. We do have an article about diversity. There's obviously people who come from backgrounds that are underrepresented in medicine. You would want to highlight that. You might be first generation college, first generation medical school. I never went to medical school, but I am first generation college, and I'm also first generation American. So that might be one element that you're going to highlight in your background. It also depends on the wording of the question. Is the wording of the question like the example I gave with Columbia? How has your background influenced you? How is it going to influence your practice of medicine? So you're going to want to bring it forward. It's not just that you are whatever background you are, whether it's a different sexual orientation, ethnic background, disadvantaged background, immigrant, whatever it is, that's something you'd want to highlight. If you are not underrepresented in medicine, perhaps you're overrepresented in medicine, then you might want to talk about how you have assisted those who are underrepresented or dealing with hurdles in society. Okay. All right. So those are some suggestions there. Let me see what else we had here. Okay, Sai asked, how should you prioritize which school secondaries to complete first? I would say, thank you for the question. It's an excellent question, Sai. I would suggest that you set up a spreadsheet, and every time you get a secondary, you write down, different columns, the day you received it, the day you want to send it back, how many questions it has, perhaps list the questions, and then record when you actually do send it back. I would prioritize in-state schools first, because those are the ones that you, especially in-state public schools, where you might have a better chance of acceptance and also a lower tuition. I would also then just prioritize those schools that you're most interested in attending, and you want to get those back. I would try very, very hard. Again, I said this many times already in this webinar, I'll say it again, to get them back within 2 weeks. If it's the 15th day, nobody's going to count you down, but or mark you off or anything like that. But try and turn them around. That's why I also recommended early on pre-writing some secondaries, because that'll help you a lot in terms of just turning this stuff around. The other thing that some applicants do is they will add schools to their primary application, and they'll space them out over a 2 or 3 or 4 week period. The disadvantage, obviously putting the ones that they're most interested in first. The disadvantage of this is that there's not even a possibility of you turning them or, getting them out faster. So, there's a slight disadvantage there. The advantage, though, is that you don't have the flood, the deluge that so typically accompanies secondary applications. But thanks for the question again. Okay, let's see. Another anonymous attendee, is it true that schools will only evaluate application after receiving the full set of application materials, primary, letters of recommendation, test scores, secondaries? Yes, and some will also want to see your Casper at that time. Now, at this point, some schools are allowing you to submit an MCAT after they send out the secondaries, but they're not going to evaluate your application without it. I don't know of any schools that will evaluate your application without having a full set of materials. Okay. When is a good timeline to submit secondaries by? Within 2 weeks of receipt. How should you prioritize which schools? All right, I think I just answered that one. What are your thoughts on using a YS response for anything other? YS response for anything other comments for wishes committee questions? I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. I can't answer it. Is it ever valid to say you want to go to a school because of where they are located if it's not local for you? I don't think that should be your sole reason for wanting to go to school. They're very proud of their program. They're very proud of their mission. You can say, I want, I like the curriculum for XYZ reasons. I identify with the mission for ABC reasons. And I also want to live in this particular city because my significant other is there, or I have family there, or whatever it is. Or I like to ski, but that should not be the main reason that you want to go there. Taylor asks, is there a specific date secondaries are sent out? Secondaries I think will start going out right around July 1. I can't remember the exact date, maybe the very end of June. And after that, they usually go out when your application is verified. MCAS last year was verifying applications, I think, within 2 weeks, but that was also because they weren't giving the MCAT until late June for several months because of COVID. I haven't seen anything saying exactly how fast they hope to verify applications this year. Previous years, it was more like 3-4 weeks for verification. And most schools do have deadlines for secondaries. If that's what you're asking. You definitely, there are serious deadlines. They're not going to consider your application if it's submitted after that, but you really want to get it in much earlier than that. If my family was less financially secure and that impacted how I was raised, should I discuss in secondaries about challenges? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Emery asks, any tips on tackling the long narrative secondaries? How do you stay concise without dragging on, but still say enough? Well, I would, first of all, you have to look at the question. What's it asking, and make sure that you answer all elements in the question. Secondly, you can perhaps include more than one example if you're trying to make a point. And you should be trying to make a point. That was one of the points I made earlier. So I'm a big believer in outlining or mind mapping before I write anything of any kind of complexity. And I would encourage you to do that, whether it's, the outlining techniques that you used, that you learned in elementary school, or like I said, mind mapping, which you can do at mindmaster.com, or which is a mind mapping software that I use. It's not the only one. Or is also, some people like to use Post-it notes. But I would think about what you want to include, what's going to, again, provide the most insight, make for the most interesting reading on the longer narrative secondaries. I hope that helped. Ooh, this is a good question. How different should my secondaries be if I'm a reapplicant to the same schools? Well, one of the key elements in reapplication is showing growth. So you should be able to show growth in both in your level of achievements and your exploration of medicine and your reasons for wanting to attend that particular school. I can't give you a percentage. You should make sure your essays are 50% different or 90% different. I can't do that, unfortunately, but you want them to be different. Now, here again, you come up with a question in terms of why were you rejected? Were you rejected because you were basically not competitive and you've improved your competitiveness either by getting a higher MCAT, getting more clinical exposure, better clinical exposure, getting some community service experience? It could be any of those things. And then you would want to write not so much about the MCAT, but about the additional clinical or the additional community service and what you learned from it. Maybe you're working and you had a promotion at work. You'd want to focus much more on what happened in the past year than what happened prior to that. But I can't really give you, a hard and fast guideline. I can tell you it shouldn't be the same. That's for sure. It didn't work last time, and doing the same thing this time is less likely to work. Okay. Again, thank you. Asking great questions. Another good question. Thank you, Taewon. I sometimes got advice not to use flowery, super descriptive language in application essays. How does this fit with your advice to be descriptive and use sensory language in narratives? I don't think sensory language is super descriptive. Flowery, specifically, I don't think it's flowery at all. If you have to look up a word in the thesaurus, that's probably flowery, or dictionary, it's probably flowery and super descriptive. Or perhaps you go into very long descriptions. I remember in high school having to read early 19th century American literature, and it was terribly descriptive, over and over descriptions of the dense forest. I was climbing out of my skin, and I happen to like to read. Nobody wants to read that now. So I'm not talking about being long-winded or flowery when I talk about using sensory language. I happen to remember that there's an essay, a sample essay on the site by a fellow who volunteered in an AIDS clinic. And this was before the treatments became effective for AIDS. And he wrote how he went to this, I think it was an apartment or a clinic, and the place just reeked. He could have said it smelled, but reeked is a more powerful word. It's not flowery. It's not super descriptive. It was appropriate. So again, this is not when I'm advising you to use sensory language. I'm not saying that you should get the thesaurus out and use every fancy word you can find. I'm saying use words that are concise and descriptive. But it's a great question, and I hope this answer helped you. All right, another good question. How important is it to be close to the character or word limit for the secondary essays? If you're talking about a character limit where they're going to cut you off after you reach that number of characters, obviously you have to be under the character limit. If you're talking about a file where they have a word limit and you upload the file like a Word doc, you have a little bit of leeway. And I think you can my rule of thumb would be somewhere between up to 5 and 10% over the word limit, because nobody's going to sit there and count them. But if you're going to get cut off, you have no option. You have to stay under the word limit. Okay. Okay. Sorry about the phone ringing. I forgot to turn the ringer off. When did medical schools expect Casper? In most cases, check check MSAR, check their application requirements. But in most cases, they want Casper with the secondary. That's what I've seen mostly. But do check the schools individually. Is there a time that it is too early to submit secondaries, even if it is a quality secondary application? I don't know that. And I don't know of any time would be too early. In other words, you get it on Monday and you return it on Tuesday. Meh, that's fine. Go for it. I would assume in that case that you pre-wrote it and you've proofed it and you made sure that the secondary essay question hasn't changed and all that. Go for it. Farida writes, hi, Ms. Abraham. Thank you so much for your time and help. How do you think we should approach secondary questions that ask what we're doing during our gap years if what we're doing is only focusing on the MCAT applications during this time? That's another very good question. I would encourage you to do something in addition to MCAT and applications during this time. I think you need to, you can volunteer, you can get a part-time job, but MCAT and application should not be a full-time job for your entire gap year. Okay. I can understand if you take a month or two and you focus on the MCAT, certainly focus on the MCAT and applications, that makes sense. But then you should be either trying to get a job as a scribe or a research assistant community service. Otherwise it's not going to look good. Okay, let's see. How many different stories should you try to fit in a secondary? 1 in detail, 2, 3. That depends on the length of the secondary and the question. Short ones, you won't have time for more space for more than one. A lengthy one, you might have time for 2 or 3. So it really depends on the question, the nature of the question, the length of the essay. Sorry, I can't be more specific. How do you incorporate a family tie into secondaries besides saying my aunt lives there or my aunt practices as a doctor there? You could tell a story about your aunt and practicing there or about visiting your aunt in that particular city. That might work. Let's see, Jennifer asks, is it okay to reiterate what you said in your secondaries in your interview? Yeah. Not all your interviewers are going to have read your secondaries. So prepare other material also, because so many months will have gone by. Presumably there will be more material for you to share. But it is okay to repeat stories and anecdotes from your secondaries in your interview. Some interviewers will have reviewed your secondary and primary, and then obviously you're going to want to minimize the amount of repetition. But if they haven't, it's fair game. Okay, what do you think about including information on being a member of the LBGTQ plus community? I'm afraid there will be a conservative adcom that will discard my application if they see something like this. I know that this should and probably won't happen, but I can't help, but I think it might. You know, schools are valuing diversity very, very, very highly. I think your risk of blending in is much greater than your risk of acknowledging your distinctiveness. So I would go for it. Okay, another one. I have a few secondary questions asking for a true autobiography. Where would you say the line is regarding trauma? I assume I should include it, but how far does one go? That's another really great question. I think the focus of an essay where you're discussing a traumatic experience should be on how you have recovered from that experience, how you've been strengthened by that experience. Again, the point would be to show resilience. You don't have to. You have to go into. I don't know what the traumatic experience is. You don't have to go into graphic detail in terms of the experience to get across the fact that there was trauma, whether it was a car accident or abuse or whatever it was. But the focus should be on how you have recovered from that experience, how you've grown again, how you're a stronger person, maybe how you've decided to contribute because of what you went through. That can make a very, very powerful essay. And again, I hope that's helpful to you. Did it? And then we have one more question here. Are secondaries and primaries read at the same time by members of the ADCOM? I think they're read in, sequentially. In other words, they're evaluating you. They're going to read your primary. They're going to read your secondary at the same, but I don't think they go through all the primaries and then all the secondaries. If that's the question, it's one person. They're evaluating your application. It's the primary and the secondary. Okay. And I think that's it with the questions at this point, and we're just about on the hour. You've been a fantastic audience. I want to once again thank you for your attention, your time, your questions, your answers. I want to thank Student Doctor Network for inviting me to present. And I want to thank Samantha for emceeing. And now I'm going to turn it back to her to close up.
Yeah, so thank you all again for attending tonight's webinar. And on behalf of SDN, we just want to extend our gratitude to Linda for taking the time out of your evening tonight to share this with you all. Most welcome. Thank you. Again, we'd like to remind you that we have many donor-supported tools and resources at studentdoctor.net to help you with your journey of becoming a healthcare professional. We are having another webinar. It will be a live Ask Me Anything with current Doctor of Physical Therapy students on Wednesday evening, June 30th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we will share the link for that in the chat for anyone that might be interested. Obviously you all are applying to medical school. But if you know anyone who's looking at going to physical therapy school or currently a PT student that may be interested, please feel free to share the link with them. Again, thank you so much for attending tonight. And thank you again to Linda.
Thank you, everybody. Good luck. And you're most welcome. Some of you are thanking. You're most welcome. Have a good evening.
We hope you have found this video helpful. If so, please like and subscribe to the Student Doctor Network YouTube channel. For more helpful articles and information, please head over to the Student Doctor Network website at studentdoctor.net.